Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. As always, it's your boy Mack. Joining me today is Kelsey Russo of The Athletic. First off, thanks for dropping by again to talk some Cavs basketball. And secondly, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be back and talk to the Cavs.
Always good to hear different perspectives on this team because it's all over the place. Sometimes you just never quite know which end of the spectrum you're going to fall in by the time you're done talking with another Cavs fan. That said, man, we've had a lot of time to sit back and just digest everything. And me personally, I've had the opportunity to sit back and just observe some of the other series in this postseason. Some very good basketball being played. I've been reflecting upon this Cavs series, since then, and it feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
It does. It really
It feels like it's in a whole other season.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, we've gotten to hear numerous opinions on just what went wrong for the Cavs and many different points of view, and everybody has a slight variation on that, but they all kind of follow the same general theme in regards to what went wrong. But as someone who covers the Cavs pretty extensively, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what exactly went awry for this young Cavaliers team.
Yeah, I think it was kind of interesting. After the series ended, I took a couple of days to really think and just kind of reflect, kind of look at things bigger picture. And in my head, a lot of it came down to the inexperience aspect. And I know that was talked about ad nauseum, but it really does play a really important factor that I think can't be just kind of brushed to the side as not being important. A lot of these guys hadn't been, to Darius, Isaac, Evan had never been to the playoffs before. Collectively, you're learning to play as a group together. So I think that kind of was at the heart of all of it. I think another aspect, obviously, too, is, they just did not shoot well at all. And that was the big thing, is if you're not, yes, you could play really, really good defense minus the keeping them off the offensive boards. But they played really solid defense throughout the whole series. But if you can't make shots, that's not going to matter, and to the degree it needs to. So I think those kind of factors in it all. I think a third thing, and Donovan talked about this a lot, after game 4, after game 5, in his exit interview, he didn't live up to what he needed to be for his guys. And I think his responsibility of that, he was supposed to take this team to another level in the playoffs because of his experience, and that just didn't translate for a number of different reasons. And and I think all of those factors kind of really played into it. But I wrote after, a couple of days later when I was reflecting, it's okay. In my head, I think this is okay. They finished where I thought they were going to finish when I looked at this at the beginning of the season. Granted, obviously things changed during the year when the Nets changed directions, but I didn't think they would maybe necessarily make it out of the first round. Maybe they would make it to the second round, but a first round playoff experience was what this Cavs team needed. And probably maybe, game 6, game 7 would have been better for them, but they just needed to make the playoffs, get this experience, see what it's all about, and now they can take that and learn from that. So I really see this as just a step in their progression, and it's not a bad step. This was a necessary step, and this result, even though, yes, it is not what any of them wanted or many Cavs fans wanted, it's a learning opportunity, and it's a necessary learning opportunity, and it shouldn't be viewed as a negative, shouldn't be viewed as a failure. Yes, Giannis's quote is ringing true in my head a lot of,
Yeah.
Yes, they failed per se, but it's not a failure, especially with where this team is at. They are continuing to grow. And we can't negate the fact that we can't forget the fact that 2 years ago they won 22 games. And you know what I mean? And
Yes.
then last year they went to 44. And that was a really, really big jump. And it was a jump that not a lot of people expected, but that was a really significant jump. And then this year, yes, you've traded for Donovan Mitchell, so that's going to raise your ceiling. But they made it to 51 wins, which hasn't been done since 2017, 18.
Yeah, final LeBron year.
Yeah. And so that's a big deal. And And it's just a part of this process in my head is how I see it all.
That's a very sane point of view.
Thank you.
So thank you for bringing that to the table. And because, you see so much of this vitriol spewed out there in regards to, this Cavs team should be in title contention. This is a failure, blah, blah, blah. And in my opinion, it's a disappointment to go out like the Cavs did. None, that to me is not so much up for debate, but a failure, I don't see it that way. I think, just like you pointed out, it's a very inexperienced Cavaliers team in that regard. Not many of them had true playoff experience. I mean, you could probably count them on one hand.
Yeah.
Karis LeVert, Jarrett Allen, Ricky Rubio, guys like that have all been there. Donovan Mitchell, obviously, they've been there, but they haven't necessarily, they don't carry a dearth of wealth of knowledge in that regard, in regards to playoff basketball. The experience level is just not there. And to me, I'm glad you brought up the Giannis of it all, because to me, it's like the statement that we all saw that Jarrett Allen put out there. That's a very human type of thing to say. It takes a lot of courage to say that. And the direct parallels between what him and Giannis said, I think should be taken into account. Like, this is a Cavaliers team that is on the rise, but is not quite at title contention. Giannis is, and they have a whole bunch of expectation there. Just from that aspect, I kind of view it as, a learning experience as well. I think that there are obviously things on the basketball side of town, that could have been done to, to win a few more games. I mean, keeping them off of the offensive glass, that was one of the things that we knew was going to be a major point of contention heading into that series, just because that's something that New York did so well during the regular season. And it's not like they shot well. They shot piss poor from the field in both the playoffs. And I believe the Cavs held them to the third fewest amount of points during that time frame. And the Cavs still hold the best defensive rating in the playoffs. It's insane. It's just couldn't knock down a shot, couldn't space the floor. Predictably, with some of the questions that we have here in regards to the front court. But in my eyes, I just think there's a lot of overreactions in regards to where this team is at right now and where they should be headed. With that in mind, I have to ask, because it's the biggest elephant in the room, and I'm sure you already know what I'm about to say. It's going to be the talk of the offseason until the 2023-24 season begins, honestly. The Cavs roster in general, there've been a lot of trade ideas thrown out there, and most of them center around one Jarrett Allen. In your opinion, just based off of these past 2 seasons, and then maybe most importantly, this playoff series, do you believe that the front court pairing of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen can coexist long term?
Personally, I do. I think we've seen enough during the regular seasons that it can work. And because again, I kind of think looking at just the playoffs is a little bit of an overreaction.
Yes.
We've seen the way that the two of them have, how they protect the paint, how they protect the rim. They work off of one another really, really well. I think a lot of this is going to be also Evan's growth. But they have talked about, and I think we've really seen it, like Jarrett really is the anchor of their defense. His ability to protect the rim is so crucial to what they do. And it's not saying it's perfect. There's obviously some spacing issues, but he is such a big proponent of that. And we've seen that when he was out with different injuries, or I would think of last year, when they were like the finger injury, and how things just went downhill without him on the court. And then obviously they also lost Evan for that at the end there too for a little bit. But that down period basically happened because they did not have Jarrett on the court. And I think we saw that, then we saw it throughout this season, just how crucial he is. Obviously, there is plenty of room for them to grow, but I think a lot of this too is the Knicks wasn't a great matchup for the Cavs, I think, and I think that plays a really big factor in this. And like So, and it's not just totally on Jarrett and Evan to grab the offensive rebounds. It's on everybody. And I think a lot of that, they noticed that, they took responsibility for that, of it can't just be those two, just being the only two people active on the boards. So I think though, like if Evan can take a step forward in his third year, it just allows those two to really coexist better. And I think they'll just continue to grow. You think about it, this was Evan's second year. This is their second year together, so it's like there's still kind of a little bit of room for them to grow together. And I think we could see that where they have grown. I think of like the big to big lob passes, like that wasn't a thing when their first year, and now it really is. They read off of one another really well. They have a really good chemistry. They know how to build off of one another, and I think that can just continue to grow and function. So I don't know. I don't think personally that they should look to move on from him in a trade. I don't think there's really a better option. I think like it just makes sense, that they are the base of your front court. They are the base of your defense if you're going to continue to build this around your defense.
I think that makes a ton of sense too, because you're talking about obviously a very, very young player in Evan Mobley, who probably has the most potential of anybody on this Cavaliers team. Not even probably, he does.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
flat out on both ends. He's already finishing almost near the top of defensive player of the year. He's probably going to win one within the next few seasons. On offense, he is still a work in progress, obviously, but still, as unpolished as he is, he's still giving you a really good stat line. Still had a career high this season. The only problem between the two is just the spacing. And one of them, probably going to have to be Mobley, is going to have to become a respectable shooter at some point. But I just don't think we need to talk about that like ad nauseum right now. I don't think it's come to the point where you have to choose.
Yeah.
And to your point, I don't think you really have a choice. You're not, if you move Jarrett Allen, you're not necessarily going to bring back exactly what the Cavs are looking for right now, exactly what they need, which is a viable upgrade at the three at some point. A lot of people see it that way. You're not going to be able to secure that and a starting caliber center in that deal without including multiple assets the Cavs just don't have to be able to shell out right now. So for better or worse, I think you just need to stick it out and see what this tandem can do. I think a lot of that is going to have to, a lot of that is also going to depend upon what happens at that three position.
Yes.
That does play a part in the spacing concerns as well, which kind of brings me to the next guy up here, Isaac Okoro. I am a huge Isaac Okoro fan. I'll just go ahead and put that out there right now. So I'm not going to try and sound like a homer here, but I still believe in him. I think that he has potential, but I do recognize that there are legitimate concerns about whether or not he can coexist in that front court with the other two, given the fact that he is not yet known as a respected shooter. And I think you saw that play out not only this postseason, but you saw that a little bit in the play-in last year too. Mm-hmm. Him getting limited action because of his inability to space the floor. This postseason, I want to say that all 13 of his three-point attempts were considered open or wide open, and for good reason. As much as I hate to say it, the defense is daring him to shoot and clogging the paint. That's just what they're going to do. That's what New York did to a T, and it worked. But just to kind of tie a bow on this, to throw a question your way, because I know you've started a in-depth analysis on the Cavs roster as a whole, in particular, highlighting specific players. And I know your most recent article was on one Isaac Okoro. Mm-hmm. Fantastic read, by the way. You guys should check it out. But for those of you who have not, I was just hoping that Kelsey could kind of give us a little bit of a thought process, a little bit of a look into her evaluation process here of Isaac Okoro. And, what are your thoughts on his season in particular? Did he live up to your expectations? Do you think he lived up to the Cavs? And where do you see him ultimately? Do you believe he belongs on this Cavs team heading forward into the future?
Yeah, it's a hard it's a hard thing because when I went back and kind of was looking at it as a whole, they drafted Isaac for his defensive prowess. Like he was known for his defensive game, and we've seen that in his first 3 seasons. They put him on some of the best guards or some of the best perimeter players in the league, and he's really, really strong at locking down his man, making shots tough for them, and just really, really good defensively. And that hasn't changed. But on the offensive end, that hasn't translated. Like you said, the Knicks really just left him open the corners so they could send another body to to clog the paint or guard Darius and Donovan and take them out of the offense and Darian Isaac to shoot. And I think what was difficult is because Isaac did so much work over the summer focusing on his shot. There was this idea that they wanted to unlock him offensively. They wanted to find more ways for him to be active offensively and not just, out in transition or cutting to the basket, just like being able to grow his game and be an effective perimeter threat. And so he spent the summer working with, their shooting coach, Andrew Olson, on his shot and did a ton of work. And so he came into preseason and training camp feeling really solid about that. And they had seen a ton of growth. But I think a part of it at the same time, so bringing in, Donovan kind of changed their whole lineup and kind of just sort of created another factor where they had to sort of figure out, okay, Donovan's going to get his shots. Darius is going to get his shots. There's only one ball. Like, how are they all going to get it? And especially too, I actually thought about this. I don't think it's in the piece, but I was thinking about this after the fact of Isaac, his role has changed so much in his 3 years. Not just he's always been that defensive guy, but he went from starting at the 3 and then moving over to the 2, especially when Colin got hurt last year. And now he's back at the 3 and starting, coming off the bench, then starting again, and so there's just kind of been a lack of consistency in that aspect that I think really can't be forgotten about. That does affect you and your ability to find a rhythm. I think we saw it not just Fitz, but in my head, we saw it with Karras of, he eventually moving to the bench allowed him to find that rhythm. So it's kind of similar with Isaac of there hasn't been that consistency. So all that to say, and it was really interesting in his exit interview, he's very much aware of where he's at and where things are at of he knows what he is defensively, but he also knows he really needs to grow as a perimeter threat and be that 3-point shooter and knock down those shots when he has them and when they're open. And while they have instilled that confidence in him and they always tell him to shoot those shots when he gets them, it's just a consistency factor and being able to do it at the necessary volume. So I think it will be interesting because, this is the last year of his contract. So there is that question of, is he a part of this team long term? And I think part of this is going to come down to they obviously value him defensively. That's no question. But do you believe in him enough? Do they believe in him enough that they can either figure out the offense where they don't necessarily need a huge volume from him, or does he take that leap that they were hoping he took this year, take it next year, and then he can be that offensive threat alongside Darius and Donovan? And I think this offseason is going to be really telling of that. And I don't know if I know what I don't know yet. I'm curious because I think we saw I think there were moments where we saw Isaac succeed. I think of that, that Brooklyn hit that 3 at the end. But the confidence to take that shot in that moment, knowing the game was on the line and he took it and made it, that's such a confidence booster for him. So it's there. It's just the consistency factor and the volume factor. So I think this offseason will be really telling. Next season will be really telling in the sense of if they don't move, if he's around, if he's on the team next year. In that sense, I think of if he can take that jump, that's going to be really important for him to be a part of this team in the future.
I think we all really want him to
Yeah.
succeed. And when I look at him, just from the general, just top down, you're talking about a guy who was drafted in a very weird time. It's COVID season. There was no real evaluation. It just completely skewed the evaluation process for most teams. So after those first couple of picks, teams just did not know what they're going to get.
Right.
Now, obviously that the tape was on, there was tape of Isaac Okoro. Obviously, he had latent abilities as a catch and shoot option. Obviously, on the defensive end, that's where the Cavs envisioned him. The perimeter defense. That's what they aimed to get when acquiring Isaac Okoro in that draft. Fifth overall, a lot of people would think, at this point in time that he's kind of been of a disappointment being drafted that high. I have removed myself from that. I'm just like, at this point, I don't care where he was drafted. I want the guy to be successful. I'm trying to recognize that it was a very odd draft, and that if you tie his statistical output strictly to his draft slot, you're probably never going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
That said, when you look at his game, I think there is still a lot there that is untapped. I think some of that has to be on the coaching staff, but a lot of it is on Isaac as well. The biggest thing to me in regards to getting him more looks, I think this team could very much benefit from a faster pace.
Like so slow.
Specifically him, like, it works. We've seen Miami is doing this right now, and it works. So I can't harp on it too much, because teams, if you know how to do it, if you have the correct personnel, you can make it work. And the Cavs did, to the tune of 51 games this season.
Mhm.
And, they, with the slowest pace in basketball, and Miami was right there behind them. And you see where they're at right now.
Yeah.
But for a guy like Isaac Okoro, I just can't help but feel that he could thrive in a faster paced environment, more looks in transition, more catch and shoot opportunities possibly. And ultimately, if the Cavs don't end up doing that, I just don't see him getting more looks. I don't see him getting more opportunities, because we know the majority of those are going to go to the backcourt, and then they're going to want Evan Mobley to continue to ascend on the offensive end. So I just don't see where he gets those extra opportunities. So being able to capitalize on what he gets right now, it's going to be highly important heading into next season. And if he is not able to do that, I think that he will end up being packaged together in some type of deal at some point. But who's to say right now? I really want the guy to be successful.
Yeah.
The Knicks series obviously did not leave a good taste in anybody's mouth. Although I will say this, and feel free to disagree, I do feel in the minutes after game 2, I think he was legitimately impactful, especially on the defensive end. I just don't think he played enough. I don't think he got enough minutes.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting, adjustment to, and I understood it in a sense of you're trying to add some offense while also inserting Karras. But yes, like in his minutes, he was so good defensively. Like he was, I don't know, he locked down guys across the board and just made it difficult. And, guys are going to get their shots, but he's really good at that aspect. But yeah, I don't think his minutes were necessarily enough to be as impactful as he could have been especially on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah, and hopefully, they're able to figure out the answer to this. I know a lot of people are of the mindset, and I gotta ask this just because I have you here. We've seen a lot of firings this offseason.
Oh my gosh, I know.
It's kind of scary. We've seen a lot of people be let go. Really experienced, really good head coaches. I don't know how much of that is to do with just like the popularity. It seems to fire guys after and what they deem an unsuccessful season, because I do feel like there is a level of consistency you need to be able to have, to achieve long-term success. We just saw Mike Budenholzer win a title not too long ago, and he's already out in the street. Frank Vogel, same thing with him a season or two ago. And it just continues to be the trend. Nick Nurse, he's out there.
Mm-hmm.
JB Bickerstaff is still the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I'm a JB fan. I believe that it's warranted, that he deserves at least one more year. to show what you can do with an improved, specifically more depth on the roster. 22 wins, 44 wins, 51 wins. Progression, at least during the regular season. He has shown it. The postseason record, a lot of people don't love it. It's 2-10 right now, but I don't hold that first series against him because he lost to the eventual champion Golden State Warriors. If you look at just this series under a microscope, yeah, you can really get pissed off at certain things that he did, but some of it was understandable due to lack of depth.
Right.
When you're looking at JB Bickerstaff and his position right now, with his standing right now with this Cavaliers team, do you feel that the Cavs are possibly making a mistake by kind of sticking with him when there are some proven and experienced guys out there?
I don't think so, because I think, to your point earlier, of there's kind of the long-term aspect of this that I think is really important in this. Of JB has seen this from the ground up. Basically, they have been through all of these steps, and to get to this point, like, and again, it's not saying that there aren't things that can be better, but there is just a belief in, okay, we are to this point, we've gotten to this point, and JB can lead us farther than that. I thought it was interesting because a lot of this came up with Kobe Altman in his end of season news conference, and I got a chance to talk with him and Chris Fedor on the side for a little bit, and he was like, please, like, end this idea, the speculation of firing JB. Like, we are sticking with him. And again, like, you take that with a grain of salt if things can change, but I understand why, because I think a lot of this has to do with, he very much connects with the players, and we've seen how that really is an important factor. If a head coach does not have the command of his locker room, but the relationships with the locker room, like, that can really affect things. And these guys believe in JB, and vice versa. And they have real relationships. They have, honest conversations that guys really appreciate and play a really big factor in that. And I think, like, that kind of, like, that plays a factor in that. Obviously, there is now kind of a timeline on things of, okay, so we've gotten to this point, they got to 51 wins, they got to the playoffs. Now they need to take another step further. And if that can't happen, like, that's going to raise some questions, which is fair. But I think in the grand scheme of things, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, of this season was not contention or bust. The season wasn't Eastern Conference Finals or we're blowing everything up kind of thing. And JB plays a factor in that of, okay, he coached them to this point, has seen them through this, and got to the playoffs. Now this is a learning opportunity, and they have to get better. He has to get better. And I think that's kind of a very mutual, like, feeling, and knowing that there is a lot to improve. But, I think to the point of, he got them to this point, and to an extent, like, deserves to sort of see this through, to continue to see it through, because it builds on the longevity of it all. And I think, because you think of, like, Mike Malone's been in Denver and how we've seen that play out. And I think that's a really good testament of, when you stick with the coach and see, eventually see success. And, like, that just kind of has to be an organizational mindset, and not just like some of these maybe more emotional moves that have happened around the league.
I mean, you're not lying. I mean, I often wonder how much of this is like fan pressure, how much of it is an emotional reaction to losing a series. Because I mean, like, we talked ad nauseum, just a few seasons back about Monty Williams, about how great of a coach he was, and he got them to the point of the finals, and he got canned. He got canned after having a pretty depleted roster. Well, I won't say depleted. I'll say top heavy. Top heavy is probably the better way to go about that. Didn't have any real depth with Phoenix after trading for Kevin Durant, obviously, and he didn't even get the opportunity to have a full season with KD. Like, to me, like, what kind of message does that send to other head coaches who might be looking to come in? I obviously, we don't have we're not flies on the wall here. We don't know what's going on from an internal standpoint. at other locations like Milwaukee. We don't know why some of these guys were let go. We don't know why Nick Nurse, players or coaches rather like that. We don't really have any real way of knowing what goes on, but we can only speculate that some of these do seem to be emotional. And I just don't want Cleveland to end up in this same space. Like, we already know that, everything that comes here is earned. The Cavaliers have largely built themselves up from the ground up rather, outside of the Donovan Mitchell acquisition. And you could even argue that was done out of homegrown talent and being able to just throw assets, when they felt that there was a window of opportunity. And so I see JB at this point in time as warranting at least one more season. And to your point, if we're talking about the same type of things next season, I think criticism is warranted. I think that any type of speculation in that regard, people side-eyeing him and his, whatever adjustments that he makes or lack thereof, I think that would be perfectly warranted next season if we are still seeing these same types of things. And just to ask you, because I don't think I've had the opportunity to just yet, do you think that from an X's and O's standpoint on his behalf, do you think there's anything, what could he have done differently during that Knicks series?
That's the thing is I really don't think there was a ton. And because I saw all the discourse on Twitter was like, make adjustments. So I was like, you really just mean just win a game. That's really what you're saying. When people are saying that, you want your team to win. And I get that. The problem is they didn't have the depth necessary to make the necessary, those kinds of adjustments per se. From an X's and O's standpoint, I don't really think there was anything crazy that would have changed. You know what I mean? Because a lot of it was okay, so you're not grabbing offensive rebounds. That's a big thing. You're not making shots. Okay, well, so you can go down the bench, sure. But the guys that didn't play weren't shooting well before the playoffs started. So I also understand not trying to keep your rotation tight and allowing those guys the space to do that, because adding another guy in that's struggling to shoot is and kind of messing up that chemistry in a sense, isn't going to help the situation. So I don't know. When I went back and watched multiple games, I watched game 4 and I watched game 5 again. And I was just I don't really see there was a ton of adjustments to make other than if you could make some shots, but that's also not on JB, they were taking, I think what was even more frustrating in a sense from when talking to players and everything, they were getting for the most part decent shots. They liked the shots they were getting. They were shots that Donovan makes, 90% of the time, or Darius makes, etc. They were getting good looks. They just weren't falling. And it's unfortunate that it happened in the playoffs, but that happens throughout the season. There's been multiple games that you could refer to where shots weren't falling and they lost a game, but it just kind of obviously looks it when it piles up in the playoffs, it's highlighted more so. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really when I said, when I went back and looked, I was I don't know. I don't think there was any major adjustment that you could have made that would have drastically affected things, because you look at it too. I think about, okay, so they've tried Danny Green in there, who was supposed to come in to be, a perimeter threat, and that wasn't as successful. And for a lot of reasons, there's, he's just now back a year from his injury. So that's a factor. You have to get that playing time. Ricky Rubio wasn't as effective as he could have been in his minutes. And kind of similar thing of, so you're not getting the same Ricky Rubio, which wasn't expected, obviously coming back from his injury, but you're not having then that point guard in that second unit the way that they probably needed to have in order to be successful. And you don't have consistency at the 3 or the depth at the 3 for a reliable 3, I should say, that is going to warrant what you need. So I don't know. I think it was more so a depth thing, and I think it really just got highlighted in the playoffs versus in the regular season.
That's precisely where I'm at. Like for me, the biggest in regards to depth, I think it really showed at the 4 and 5 position because
Yeah.
you're playing Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen damn near 40 minutes. Really, almost all the starters played heavy minutes outside of the three who that those minutes were kind of split between Jetty, Karras, and Okoro. But at that 4 and 5 position, not having a third big was just brutal, especially when you're watching Julius Randle, um, Mitchell Robinson dominate on the offensive glass, and then Isaiah Hartenstein come in and give the Knicks really good minutes. That really hurt, by the way.
Yes, yeah, right.
Watching him provide them with just like solid playoff minutes, that was brutal to watch. But that just goes back to the depth, like not having guys available to give these guys a breather. And I think a lot of what we saw to get around that during the regular season was staggering of minutes, you know, especially prior to Kevin Love being benched and whatnot. They were able to get away with that because obviously Kevin Love can still rebound to a pretty good degree. He's still a threat to knock down the three ball, although the percentage is plummeted, you know, after that injury. But they couldn't do that. Obviously, they had to go small in the playoffs. They tried Dean Wade. That didn't work. Lamar Stevens can only do so much. And Robin Lopez, you know, we love him for his vibes, but if you're having to play him, you're in massive trouble if you're having to play him in the postseason. But I say all that to say, just to kind of loop it back around. It reminds me of something that I heard Jeff Van Gundy say the other day on the broadcast during that Miami game. And that's that, you know, when you're talking about adjustment, it's gotten overplayed. It's just like, just play better.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. Like the coach can't do everything. He can only motivate you past a certain point. He can only play so many guys. He can't make shots for you. And he certainly can't rebound the basketball for you. So some of that is on the players. I do not completely absolve JB of blame. I'll be the first to say that, but I just think we've gotten to the point where, you know, just because some of these other guys are available, that doesn't mean that JB has to be canned. Because I don't think you're sending a good message if you do that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, I mean, it's kind of it's a collective necessity to take blame for what happened, you know, and because like you said, like there is only so much he can do. And then some of it comes to, you got to go do it on the court. And if they're not doing it, and, you know, I thought was interesting during exit interviews and what kind of, I didn't understand this discourse as either was guys were very honest during those exit interviews.
Jarrett Allen, especially.
Yeah, exactly. And then people got mad. And I was like, wait, you hold on, people. Like, you want them to be honest. And so they're talking about what went wrong. They're taking, you know, responsibility for it. They're acknowledging it. They don't really have an answer, but they're being honest. And that's what you want from those guys. And I don't know. I thought it just was interesting of how like the discourse following the postseason.
I mean, it's always going to be that way, you know, for any team after such a disappointing loss. But I think that, you know, we got so spoiled for so long with postseason excellence, you know, with LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love and company. We got spoiled for years. So to get that first taste of playoff basketball after such a long layoff and undergoing a rebuild, it just brings out the worst sometimes in the fan base. And I get it, you know, fandom is not an exact science. It's just one of those things that can be really crazy sometimes. That said, to close things out today, we heard somewhat of a rumor. I don't know if it's been proven true yet that the Cavs possibly intend on bringing back Jetty Osman, whose deal at this point, I think his next season is non-guaranteed, and Lamar Stevens. What do you make of that? Do you think it's just a depth play, or do you think the Cavs are signaling that they're going to give these guys another opportunity in the rotation?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's first and foremost is a depth thing. And I think because we've seen throughout the season, the last couple seasons, different moments where guys like Lamar and guys like Jetty can be that spark off the bench, can play a really important role. And so if you're not seeing options out there that they think are better suited for this group. Like it would make sense to bring them back and kind of run it back in a sense, and allow them to continue. I think as well, like, it's kind of you're giving them another chance to prove that they should be in the rotation and or more consistently in the rotation, and by bringing them back, you allow that door to be open, and they now have a chance to prove that. And I think that's kind of a really important element to it of you can't show that you should be in the rotation if you don't have that opportunity. And with Jetty's contract being non-guaranteed right now, I think they have until the end of June to pick it up, or to guarantee it, sorry. And then Lamar is on a club option, that it's kind of giving them that chance to prove themselves even more so. And I think for them, a lot of it is consistency. It's not like we've seen moments where they have had incredible games that they've played. Jetty's hit, what was it? That game was like 5-3, 6-3, something crazy.
Yeah.
Or Lamar has been really good defensively and hit those shots. And so there's just moments where they've shown that. It's just kind of building out that, okay, can you be a consistent rotational guy, and not, kind of fall in and out of the lineup, or be more of a spark guy? Like where is the consistency? So
I think, from just particularly a depth standpoint, they're relatively cheap. I think that's what it boils down to. It's cheap. You don't know what you're going to be able to get with the MLE. I think that's really going to be something heading into this postseason that is going to have many people speculating on who the Cavs could potentially bring in. And that's not necessarily at their call. They're going to have to wait things out. They're going to have to see who's actually interested and who's available. We've heard a lot of names out there, but we just don't know what's going on right now. So I get the allure of bringing back some guys who've been in the system, who are still relatively cheap and can still give you something. When I say that, I mean more specifically, in my opinion, because I don't think the ship is set on Lamar. I'm still a pretty big Lamar Stevens guy, but I think when you're talking about perimeter spacing, when you're talking about a guy who can still knock down shots at a pretty high clip, although inconsistently, Jetty Osman. I mean, we're talking about a guy who still just knocked down 37.2% of his triples during the regular season, which is by far the hot for many of the reserves that the Cavs have right now. And he still can get hot. He's still kind of a microwave in that regard. We saw that during the regular season. It just boils down to me additional depth, and maybe possible trade chips, at a certain point, but you never know. I honestly believe it's a good idea. I have no idea if this is actually true. I'm sure it is, but this is that time of the season. It's that time of the year where you're constantly hearing rumors. You don't really know what's true or false unless you're severely connected. But I can understand the moves. I guess all that to say that I definitely understand it, because we just don't know what's going to happen with the mid-level exception.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's going to be the biggest question is and because depending on who's available, you bring in maybe one rotational guy, like two, that's all your mid-level is going to bring in. And so that's not enough depth, obviously. So why it makes sense in that sense to just add to the depth. And then, okay, so depending on who's available, you go bring back one guy with your mid-level exception, but then those guys can add even more depth behind him. So it's gonna be interesting. And like you said, there's so many names floating around. I think it's gonna be interesting with obviously watching the rest of the playoffs, because guys who are now still in the playoff mix could earn contracts off of that, or big paydays. So it's just gonna be kind of interesting to see once free agency starts, what happens and how this all kind of plays out.
Absolutely. And I think Cavs fans are going to be kind of waiting with bated breath in regards to that, because it's many of them are trade Jarrett Allen or bust, make the most of Donovan Mitchell's window here, but just sit back and be patient. Let Kobe Altman work his magic. We've seen him do that the past couple of off seasons. He'll make something happen, in my opinion. But With that being said, like we always tell you guys, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can at @iscavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. Kelsey, thank you so much for coming back and talking some Cavs basketball, talking some sense into some of the viewers here and talking them off the ledge. Got anything you're working on?
Not at the moment. It's a little bit of a like down period with it being the off season, but trying to work on some things for like some bigger features for later in the summer. So keep an eye out.
Definitely will. Make sure you guys check out Kelsey's work on The Athletic. That said, go Cavs. Have a good one.